Hello, everyone, and welcome back to CPD Readings. I'm your host, as always, CPD. So, in our last episode, episode 3, we met Dalmuth, as well as the other members of the Black Shepherds, as they received new orders to go to the town of Rakashaw. Now, in this episode, we'll be exploring the town of Rakashaw, as well as our main character there, Nil. Now, without further ado, let's see what's going on there. The town of Rakashaw, Chapter 4. I wake with pains in my stomach. I lay there for a short time. We didn't have enough food for us all again, I think to myself, as my stomach roils and complains. The Master of Trade said that there were more raids along the coastal towns, and it stopped the usual shipments of grain and cattle coming in from Khantoon. There was hardly ever enough food for us all now. It had become a usual occurrence. Either me or my older brother Nath would go hungry, so their younger brother, Mas, could eat regular meals. It was something that Nath and I talked about, saying that taking care of him was the right thing to do. It was a quick conversation, which we both agreed on, but just because it was the right decision, it didn't lessen the hunger pains. During that winter, our mother caught an illness that sapped her strength. She laid in bed for several days, coughing constantly and covered in sweat. Like most others that got sick, she died shortly after she fell ill. It took little over a week for that sickness to ravage the kind, happy woman that took such care with everything she did. The woman was filled with so much love for her family. She was so large in my eyes that I thought the idea of her dying to be impossible, despite the stories I would hear from other families that were stricken by the illness. I remember thinking to myself that such a woman could not, would not die from an illness. She was too grand for that. In the end, we didn't get to see her before she died. Our father was afraid that if we got close to her, that we might catch the illness as well. My father said the words, but they were filled with her love, and I knew it was her request. I knew she was gone when I woke one night due to the noises our father was making. I slowly crawled down the ladder from the top floor where my brothers and I slept. I opened the door leading to their room, and as I did, I was greeted by a sight that will haunt me for years to come. The noise was coming from my father. He was cradling her lifeless body in his arms, rocking her back and forth, as if he were putting a young child to sleep. His wailing and grief were so much that it wasn't until that moment, when I had intruded on this scene, that I knew how deeply he cared for her. Shortly after that, our father joined what was called the Richmond Brigade, named for the master of the Smiths Guild. How our father ever thought he was going to do well in war, I'd never know. He was a cobbler by trade, a simple man who never spoke out in anger, and thinking on it, I couldn't even remember him raising his voice. He was the last person I imagined signing up to fight in what had become known as the Coastal Wars, but in times of war, the last thing ordinary people cared about is the state of their shoes. He said that he would send home whatever money he could. That was over 8 months ago. The money stopped after the first 3. We stopped holding out hope that more money would come, and I tried to not even speak about him anymore, not with friends or either of my brothers. I resented him for leaving me, and my brothers, to go fight in these wars that they knew little to nothing about, fighting against an invisible enemy. He should have stayed and raised us, I think, as resent fills my thoughts. Then, giving voice to my thoughts, if he was going to fight and die, he should have done it here, as I repeatedly punched the image of my father as it appeared on my pillow. He should have been here, fighting these fat masters and giving the food and money to those in need, not in some far field for the masters who probably sent him to his death because they had started seeing their own pink toes again and thought they were beginning to starve. There were 6 masters in the town: a master of commerce, laws, the guard, trade, smiths, and medicine. Personally, I only had the time of day for 2 of the masters, commerce and smiths. The master of commerce regularly came around to the smiths and bought products and tried to speak to everyone he seen. He was an older man, balding head, gaunt features, with a small tuft of beard hanging from his chin. But despite his appearance, he would walk around the town for several hours every week, each time with a different person, whose only purpose was writing things down and making notes whenever the master asked. The talk in the taverns is that the masters couldn't get enough food for all the town due to the ongoing raids, and that taxes needed to be raised in order to pay for more supplies. The town blames Khantoon, the farming nation to the south, for not only their lack of empathy, but some going as far to say that they were organizing their own products to be captured and brought back to them to try and profit off us twice. But I know better. I know that those governing bastards are just hoarding our food, our grain, our cattle, our medicine, the stuff we need to survive, demanding more and more, knowing that we suffer. They are the ones that remain fat in their plush houses and not feeling or not caring for how their people suffer as long as their coffers stay full. How could they live with themselves where their people suffer? Those are the heartless bastards that keep us weak, giving us just enough to keep the people docile, while they pay for their lavish parties and their whores, all off the backs of the people who they claim to be fighting for. It sickens me. Sometime later, after I had camped, I climbed the ladder down to the lower level of our home and was warmly greeted by Mass. "All right, you ready to head out for the day?" I ask. He holds his stomach for a moment and looks back at me. "Oh, I don't know. I'm really not feeling well. Maybe I'll stay." Before he can finish, I stick out my tongue and blow air through my mouth, making a crude noise. "Liar," I say to him. "Come on now, grab your jacket, we're going to be late." Before we make our daily walk to the town square, we go into the family shop, built next to our home, to check in on Nath. He was the only one who listened to our father when he tried to teach us about cobbling. I was often daydreaming of fighting, thinking that the gifts the gods gave me, my size and my strength, was only meant for being clad in armour. Dreams of shouting in triumph while I was wielding a sword and riding on a horseback, going from one fight to another, fighting bandits and monsters like the heroes from stories. Nath, though, he was always more practical in his thinking. What he learned today would feed them tomorrow, was what our father would say to me when he caught me in my dreams. He always had a quip to hand, passing them off like some ancient knowledge. All the ancient knowledge or quips in the world didn't help him in the end. Nath would sit in that damned shop, hoping that someone would come by so he could earn a little extra. I never saw the point in that, and seemingly he didn't either. A few months back, he would pre-make some shoes, thinking that if someone came in and saw what work he could do, that people were more likely to buy his services. But as of late, even that stopped. Was he giving up? Or maybe he already had. It didn't matter. Since they lived a ways out of the town, there was only a slim chance someone would come by anyway. "Make all the shoes you want, brother. It won't change the fact that people with whatever monies they had will put it towards food, and not your shoes, no matter how well you made them." "Morning, Nath," we called from the door leading into the shop. Nath looked up from the shoe he was working on. So he's in the mood for cobbling today. Nath's glasses had slid down to the base of his long nose. Brushing his long brown hair from the front of his face with one hand, a small knife still in the other, greeted us with a warm smile. A warm thing, despite the bags under his eyes. "Morning, you pair of bollockses," he said in a friendly manner, long fingers reaching out to his right where his crutches were propped against the wall. Placing them under each arm and using them to walk, he greeted each of us with a hug. Nath hadn't always been like this. He was in an accident a few years back that took away a lot of the strength in his legs, but his spirit still seemed to be strong, quick to laugh and quick to smile. "Off to town?" Nath asks. Yeah. Thought we'd take a day off from fighting bandits and monsters to go earn an honest living. What do you think, Mass?" I joked, rustling his red curly hair. After slapping my hand away, he looked up at me. With his red rosy cheeks and a buck-toothed smile, "I'd rather do that than fold and hang up more sheets for the washerwomen." Nath and I both laughed. "Yeah, can't blame you for that one," said Nath. It won't be too much longer. You're growing, and you'll get a different job soon, and then you'll wish to be back with the washerwomen." "All right, we best head," I say, guiding Mass out the door. "Need us to pick anything up from town?" A pinch of flour wouldn't go amiss, but we'll be fine for another day or two if you can't." responded Nath. Right, so, we'll see you tonight. Alright, best of luck. After walking for just shy of an hour, kicking stones to one another as we passed the time, we arrived at the front gate of the town, giving the morning guards a happy morning as we walked by. While making our way to the town square, we passed the town gallows, where the Jensens were still hanging. Taking a moment to look at them, the words traitor, thief, rebel hung from small wooden boards that had been nailed into them before they were given over to Duosnos to walk his icy plain, their blood leaving the wood beneath their feet stained. They had been hanging there for a few days now. Usually, people would have been hung and taken down to be buried after the deed was done, but the masters wanted them to stay there, and as their bodies rotted, they started to attract carrion of all sorts. The feet of the father, the tallest, had already been shooed away by some of the stray dogs Rakashaw seemed to attract lately. The governing body wanted the bodies to stay. They wanted to make an example of them, a sickening reminder of their power. Talks of the Dirbola nation having attacked and overtaken our neighbours to the north, Kenting, had the masters terrified, seeing traitors and rebels everywhere they looked. Bah, the Jensens weren't revolutionists. They just wanted more food for their family, claimed that what they were getting wasn't enough. And they were right. A lot of people died in the last winter because of their caution. Some died from the cold, but more from simple starvation or illness. The Jensens' mistake was that they did it publicly, expecting, or maybe just hoping, that others would agree and rally around them. They couldn't have been more wrong. This is what happens here. Speak out against the masters, and you are taken in the night, strung up and left to rot, left to be a message, left to be a symbol of their power. Take what you are given and don't complain, or it'll be you and your loved ones next. Those bastards. I look forward to the day I can stand on this very spot and see those same men and women flail, as all their power doesn't stop them from meeting Duosnos in his icy fields. That image bringing a genuine smile to my face. As I looked at Mass, I could tell that he was trying to look anywhere other than the corpses on the gallows. Looking around, perhaps to see some of the other boys his age he tends to play with, at the sky and then back down to his shoes. He doesn't have the stomach for this world, does he? Trying to reassure him, I ruffle his hair and smile down. Come on, little man, let's get to the square before all the good jobs are gone. He nods and tries to smile, happy to get away from this horrific scene. I will protect him from all of this, no matter what. Leaving the Jensens, we make our way to the square with some of the other boys and girls of the town. If you didn't have farmland or family work, everyone would go to the square and hope that you got picked for work. Mass, still being young and short, even for his age, would usually get picked by the washerwomen if they had got to the square early enough. If they didn't, he would end up getting picked by one of the local taverns. I always wanted him to get picked by the washerwomen. Sure, Mass would spend the day carrying baskets and helping them to wash and dry clothes, and it wasn't the highest paying job. That had become the smiths, probably due to the demand for weapons and armour for the coastal wars. But he would be safe. It was either that or the taverns, and you never quite knew who would come through the tavern. I had seen how ale would change a man. It could make the most harmless and jovial of men into violent men who were more than willing to hit a child for not moving fast enough with their next drink. As Mass and I arrive at the square, thankfully it didn't look like many boys had shown up yet. Mass spots some of his friends, and without a word sprints off to join them, shouldering into the back of one of the kids, sending him tumbling to the ground. Shit, I mutter quietly and start pushing others out of the way as I try making my way over to him. Before I get halfway, the boy gets up from the ground, turning to see Mass. He simply laughs and throws his arm over Mass's shoulders and giving him a playful slap on the cheek. Stuttering to a stop, I let out a breath, relieved to see they're only playing. As I come to a stop, a voice shouts to me through the gathering crowd. Still as overprotective as always, huh, Nil? Looking over, I see my longtime friends, Eam and Neas. The two boys are a similar age to me, though both were smaller by a little less than a foot. But in build, they're basically branches. We'd become fast friends a few years back, after we borrowed a couple of bottles of wine that was to be sent to another party the body were throwing, in celebration of a good trading year. I remember Neas convincing us to steal them. Them and their rich friends won't miss just a couple of bottles, he said at the time. But judging how the town guard chased us that night, you would have sworn we stole all the gold the town had to offer. We drank the wine by the riverbank, saying we were going to drink until we threw up, which, by all accounts, wasn't very long. None of us had drank wine before, and that red shit tasted awful. We all ended up throwing up before we even got drunk. Only ale from now on, yeah? Ian had said, and we all agreed. As the two boys strolled over, I don't think they could be any more different. Ian gives a small wave, his curling dirty blonde hair hanging just over his ears, giving him an unkempt look, with eyes as soft as they were kind. Nias, on the other hand, walked with both hands in his pockets, looking everywhere as he walked. A nervous tic? Or was he just looking for a cute girl to talk to? I never could tell. His hair was combed back today, the sides of his head shaven, with a freshly busted upper lip. As they approached, Nias spoke first. Overprotective. The man doesn't know anything else. If I didn't know you better, I'd say you're just always spoiling for a fight. Will you stop? Nil's only spoiling for a fight whenever he's hungry, thirsty, or awake, Ian says in a mocking tone. Nias, Ian, I call to them, tilting my head back in a quick gesture by way of greeting. I walk over to them, greeting each of them in turn by clasping one hand and touching shoulders. Any of the guild heads shown up yet? I asked them, ignoring their barb. Nah, not yet, said Ian. I think that the Smiths came out earlier. Well, they seen that you weren't here, so they went away, waited for you to arrive, Ia said with a sneer. How would you leave off, I say, giving him a small shove. Anyway, do you see the gents were still strung up? Mad shit, that. Do you really think they were rebels? I don't think they were. Could you imagine? Those lot trying to start a rebellion? Nobody would have followed them. And clearly, nobody did. You want to know what I think? I think that you'll lose brain cells, Nias, Ames said, interrupting him. Brain cells? Nias replied with a confused look. What do you mean you'll lose brain cells, Nias? Ames said, cutting him off again. If you don't stop talking long enough to breathe, he finishes with a laugh. Yeah, and someone in your position can't afford to think too much either. You'll overwork the few you have left, I chime in with a laughing tone. Nias tries speaking up, but I just lean into Ian and point towards Nias's ears. Look, I say in a whispered tone, but loud enough to make sure Nias can hear me as well. If you look closely, you can see smoke coming out of his ears. As we talk and joke, I look to Nias and point at my own upper lip. What happened to you? Your old man? He ain't my old man, Nias says firmly. He's my sister's old man. But yeah, it was him. Sure didn't he go and drink too much again last night? He's a useless fecker. But after a few too many, he's one hell of a right hook, he says as he slowly throws a right hook of his own. I wish the man had joined up to the Richmond Brigade. But he's too much of a coward for it, I reckon. Likes to drink and fight kids half his size, and I doubt those pirates have many of those about. There was an awkward silence for a moment. Ian was quiet because his family situation was very different to that of Nias's, and he didn't know what to say. I was quiet because I felt the opposite to how Nias was talking. I wish my own father hadn't signed up, but I never had to provoke my own father into beating me instead of one of my younger siblings. But anyway, the hell's with my lip? Like I was saying, what do you really think about the Jensens though? That's some barbaric shit, right? Like, it's not just me that thinks that, right? Like, who leaves bodies there just hanging like that? Yeah, it's bad. The masters really are getting paranoid lately, I reply. Our dads were friends since they were our age, says M. I never would have thought of them as traitors. My dad was pretty shaken. I tried to ask him about it, but he just tells me that he doesn't want to talk about it. It's because they weren't traitors, I say, maybe a little too loud. There's just no way they were traitors. How can anyone actually believe that shite? They were killed because they spoke out against the body publicly. It's as simple as that. Ian and Nias look at me, weary of how loud I was speaking, all the while gesturing to lower my voice. Paying little heed to them, I keep going. What? Do you really think they were trying to start a rebellion? with a few shop workers, farmers, and starving people. The guards could kill us all without even trying. And what would be the point? Hush, said Ness. Not so loud. Are you in such a hurry to get up on the gallows as well? I take a moment and look around. Turning my head, I could see several small groups of kids all around us, who were either staring directly at us or trying all too hard to not look our way. Either way, it was obvious that I had already said enough. Sighing, I try releasing the grip anger had on my chest. Neas was right. My quick mouth and short temper had always gotten us into all sorts of trouble, and now definitely wasn't the time for it. You're right, I'm sorry, I say to them in a defeated tone. I know stuff like this gets to you, Nil, but I hear you, Am said, trying his best to calm me. Leaning in conspiratorially. Maybe I shouldn't be telling you about this. I mean, it's just rumours. But I overheard my dad talking to my ma about something he's heard in the tavern, and it sounds like Tirbola are on the march again. Tirbola? I repeat in alarm. Hush, both Nias and Am say, giving a quick look around to make sure nobody was standing too close. Tirbola keeps winning every war they fight, and after Kenting, we're the closest town. The masses are afraid, very afraid. Am finishes. That same fear he says the masters have, I see reflected in his own eyes. They think that they'll be next, I realise, clearly far slower than either of these two. Am nods, confirming my guess. I heard that the master of the guard have increased their number and are recruiting again. Seems like they're getting ready for a fight, replies Neas, giving credence to the rumour. A fight? I ask. What? The guards think that they can take on the entire Terbolan army? Sure, let's send off whoever is able to fight to the coastal wars, just for them all to die, and those that can't fight pirates have to stay and fight Tirbola. The masters are truly God-sent geniuses, I finish sarcastically. A nervous look comes to their faces, and that's when I realise they've already talked about all this. So why bring it up again? Nil, you keep getting picked by the Smiths, right? Am asks nervously. And, I reply, not fully understanding where the conversation was going. And what did they have you make? And don't just tell us it's all horseshoes. Ah, so that's where it's going. I start subconsciously shifting my weight on my feet, nervous because I don't know how to answer. M presses on. They've been making arrowheads and swords, haven't they? I hadn't thought much on it. The Smiths did have me making weapons, but I've been working there so long now that I just thought they were getting me to make more important things than nails, hammers, and horseshoes. I thought that they saw promise in me, that I was getting better, and I could be trusted to make things that were more important. At the realization, I feel my heart sink into my roiling stomach. What an idiot. I simply nodded in answer. Ah, you see, says Neas, even the Smiths think that the war is on the way. That's why more and more boys have been brought into the Smiths, boys that wouldn't usually get picked. He was right. Before it was just a few boys, but now I had thought that they had brought on more boys to take up the work I wasn't doing anymore, and I even grinned to myself to see two boys doing the work that it took just me to do. But if they were indeed making weapons to fight Tirbola, gods, I'm such an idiot. Of course they were right. How could I not have noticed before? I have seen more boys around the Smiths, I say quietly, helping to confirm their suspicions. Boys that aren't as big as I am. I didn't pay them any mind, but now that you mention it, it is weird. But don't either of you go saying anything. You know I'm not supposed to talk about the work at the forge. If it gets out that I told you, then they won't bring me back, I hurriedly add, not keen on the idea of my family losing the job that brings in the most coin. And that alone doesn't seem strange to you, asked Neas. The Smiths don't like to share their secrets. They never have. Yeah, they're secrets, that's fine. But what they make? Come on, Nil, use your brain. Something's not right, and we all know it. I don't reply. Instead, I start looking around, looking for any excuse to get me out of the conversation. Mercifully, I spot the heads of the different guilds approaching. Finally, I say in a low voice. Walking away from my friends, I go to the front of the group to be better seen. I stand there while names are called for jobs and the group becomes smaller as children scurry away for the day's labour. I can't help but think on the words of my friends. Something's not right, and we all know it. It used to be that the Smiths would take their picks after the farmers and the bakers, deeming food workers to be the most important jobs in the town. The fact that blacksmiths and woodworkers now get first pick spoke to how terrified the masters had gotten lately. As I stand looking forward, silent in my musings, I spot Richmond, the head of the blacksmiths, and as I do, I can't help but stare the man down. Richmond seemed like a decent enough man, but he was always too tidy, too clean for my liking. And as I study him, I see why. I look at Richmond's hands, and as I do, I can't help but think, those aren't the hands of a smith. I couldn't see any grime or oil build up in those knuckles, none of the usual signs of working on the forges. In contrast, I looked down at my own hands, the nail beds black, the knuckles outlined with small traces of black. My fingers had small cuts, my palms calloused, and I think to myself that these are the hands of a builder. Looking back to Richmond, the anger starts to build in my chest again. I guess you don't work the forges anymore, do you? No, just send the young boys to do the hard labour, while you call yourself a master blacksmith. Do you even remember what end of a hammer to hold, old man? Do you even remember the feeling of the hammer as it vibrates as you hit a hot lump of iron to bend it into shape? Nah, I bet you don't. As I continue to throw mental insults at the man, I remember a conversation I had with my dad when I was new to forge work. After a few days of working the forge and never seeing Richmond there, I asked him, if he is the head of the blacksmiths, then why does he never work them? He just sends others to do the hard work and then takes all the credit for himself. I remember my dad looked at me. The exhaustion in his face stood out more than any other feature on the man's face. Richmond used to work the forges, he said, in his soft way of speaking, each word seeming like an effort. You're too young to remember those days, Neil, but he was gifted in working metal, and it was because of his work that he was given the post of black artisan. I looked at him, astonished. Had my own father really defended that lad? What he was saying didn't make any sense. So what you're saying is that when someone got so good at something, they stopped you from doing it? I asked him in the memory. It didn't make any sense then, and in truth, it made little sense to me now. In time, son, if you listen to the forge master, you will become a true metal artisan, just like Richmond. I will never be like that pig of a man, I shouted, interrupting him and storming out of the workshop. That was one of the last conversations we had. He never wanted me to be like Richmond. He simply meant that he wanted his son to have a good life, an easier life than that of a poor cobbler. But that wasn't something I wanted. I wouldn't want to work so hard to become a forge master or a black artisan, just to have it simply plucked away. No, I wanted to create, to fix, to work the bellows and relish in that heat, until the day came where I couldn't work anymore. That's what I want. Coming back to myself, I found I was still staring at Richmond. He was a man untouched by the times. All these master artisans are the same, fat on their own pride, while the town suffered. Jonas, Marthil, Neas, and Nil, said a voice, the shouting of my name dragging me from my thoughts. I noticed Richmond glancing in my direction before looking back to the scroll he was holding. That's all the Smiths for today, Richmond announced, before rolling up his scroll and making a swift exit from the square. Neas elbows my side, speaking in a lowered voice. Damn you, man. You might want to unclench those fists of yours. Looking down, I don't know how I hadn't noticed before. I had been clenching my fists so tightly, my knuckles had allowing the tension to go out of my fingers. I turned my hands over, watching as they turned back to their familiar shade of pale pink. As I turn them over, I see marks where my nails dug into the palms of my hands, looking as if I had clenched any harder, I would have broken the skin. Well, better than storming up and telling Richmond how you really feel, Neas joked. I give him a weak smile and thank him with a nod. Did you hear that, lads? Aim says, coming up to us. The three of us on forge duty today. Yeah, baby. Time to build up some muscle, Neas says, flexing his arm and smiling. Oh yeah, agreed Aim, posing in like fashion. Just wait till the ladies see us after a couple of days in the forges. We'll be even bigger than you, Nil. Nea says, giving me a small shove. It was never about how big your arms were. I lean in, sniffing the air around him, before pinching my nose and waving a hand in front of my face. Just how bad you smell. The three of us, along with the other two boys who were called to work the forges, headed there without much delay. I didn't know the other two boys very well. Outside of my family and close friends, I tend to not talk much with others from the town. I'm not very good at making friends, I think to myself. Sure, I'd have short conversations with just about anybody, and was usually friendly to others around the town. But almost as soon as a conversation started, I'd find myself looking for a way out, trying to find reasons to cut the conversation short. Or I just felt I didn't have time to spend with the other boys my age. Who are the other two lads that got called? I asked Am. Oh, them. That's Jonas and Marthel. They're Kamala's kids. The shop owner. They're good lads. Crap when it comes to sports, but sound enough. As Aim spoke, Nias calls over his shoulder. Oi, will you hurry up or Mala will spank you with a hot poker? The two boys jog to catch up. Never mind that yoke, says Aim. You're grand lads, take your time. You'll be working the forges. You'll need all the energy you can spare. I look at them both. A look on my face that asks, and how would you know that? Neither of you have ever worked the forges yourselves. But I say nothing. Aim was almost the polar opposite to me. You could always find Aim with a different group of lads around the town, playing games or having actual conversations with people. Not the short conversations that I'd have, but actual conversations. I was jealous of that for a time, until one day Aim and I had gone into town, and Aim stopped to talk with what seemed like every person in the town. What should have been a short trip turned into a laboriously long journey. Eventually, I found a reason to cut that trip short as well, and excused myself, choosing to take the long walk back home. Bloody hell, I thought to myself at the time. How in the hell does he have the energy to speak to people all day? I only joined in a little, and I am exhausted. Now, folks, that is the end of episode 4 and our first chapter in the town of Rakashaw. If you made it this far into the video, don't forget to give us a like and a sub. We really do appreciate it. In our next episode, episode 5, we'll be sticking with the town of Rakashaw. So I do hope that you join us for that as well. And until then, be seeing you.